Hey, this is Russell Moore, and today I'd like to do something a little new. We'll see if we keep doing it or not, but we'll call it more on Mondays for right now. And really, what I'd like to do is to talk to you about some of the things that I'm working on in the newsletter. Those of you who subscribe to the newsletter will have gotten your issue for today. And for those of you who don't, let me explain what I do in the newsletter is not to come to a completed product, an article, but rather to sort of invite you to come in earlier in the process when I'm sort of sorting through things and working through things. And so if you'd like to subscribe, you can do that at the website, russellmoore.com, or in the link that's here on the profile page. But what I'm talking about this week is a number of things. One of those things is over the language of Black Lives Matter. And I'm reflecting on a really thought-provoking article that I read earlier in the week by Jonathan Last in his newsletter, which is always thought-provoking. And he talked about how initially there were some people who thought that the phrase, not talking about the organization, but the phrase Black Lives Matter was exclusive. The way they were hearing it is Black Lives Matter, other lives don't. When in reality, what was being intended by that and what is being heard by most people now is universalizing, which is Black lives matter and they ought to matter to you. And so I talk about in the newsletter how we as Christians ought to understand that sense of coming to the universal through the particular, and how in the scripture there is this ongoing theme of paying attention to those who are invisible to you, those whose lives you maybe don't reject as mattering, but whose lives you don't even see at all. So you aren't then able to bear their burden. So that's what you have going on in Jesus's account of the man beaten by the side of the road, for instance, in Luke 10. It's not just the abstract, human life is important. It's this man's life is important. Or in Acts 6, when you have the Greek widows who are not being cared for within the congregation. And someone had to say, let's care about these Gentile widows. And the whole theme is present in Scripture, and I talk about that in the newsletter. But then the other thing is a question that came in from one of y'all about the pandemic. And the question was, should we see the pandemic as judgment of God? And I've heard a lot of that from people who have said, well, God sent the pandemic in order to punish us for fill in the blank. And so I talk about in there how, in one sense, being in this world outside of Eden and on the other side of the New Jerusalem is the judgment of God. But that we don't have the prophetic authority to be able to come in and say, well, this is God's response to that, as though we were spirit anointed, like Jeremiah or Isaiah or Ezekiel or someone else. And also that Jesus warns us against doing that. So it would be wrong to say somehow, well, Italy is under the judgment of God in a way that New Zealand is not, or South Korea was under the judgment of God in a worse way, but now God's happier with them by tracking the COVID statistics. I don't think that's a Christian way of looking at this, and we talk about that. And then, of course, talking about some things that I'm reading, and this is one of them right now. Fantastic book. I think I'll write about it later on, The Master and His Emissary, and some stuff that I'm listening to right now. And so let me know what things you would like for us to talk about in the newsletter, in the comments below, in the weeks ahead. And if you don't subscribe, sign up. And I look forward to carrying on the conversation with you on the More to the Point newsletter. See you next time.